now it's like you're a witness.
Yeah, I know. I should be like blacked out.
Yeah. So, you prefer Brennan?
Cash is what I've been going
Cash.
with, just because, dude, I don't know what it is about my name, but I get like Brandon or Brendan.
I get Jason a lot.
I started getting Byron and Britton and all.
Because the rules are out the window.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I was like, you know what, Cash. It's easy to remember. It's just so. But I'll answer to either.
Yeah. No, you're doing great. Yeah. So we're here at the recording studio at City Music on Watson. Jacob V Weekly talking about the two big shows we're doing next week at the Heavy Anchor. Friday night, Jacob V and the Yes Men with the Saturday Brothers, and Saturday night, the big return of Youth and Canvas with my new band Blinded by Stereo. Cash, tell me about the journey. So you're back in St. Louis.
Correct.
Now you're living over, I'm not going to dox you on the thing, but you're living over in a neighborhood. I was a Lyft driver a few summers ago, and right there in that neighborhood, I dropped off a young gentleman with a bum hip who I think was just going over there to score heroin.
Sure.
You're right by the Patricias.
I might have seen that guy.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And lovely intersection.
Oh,
that location has been a intimacy retail shop for a long time.
Has it?
Yeah, even before Patricia's was a thing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you don't ever go to that KFC, do you?
I haven't. Funny story.
It's worth the trip to get to a better one.
Before I moved to Austin about 4 years ago, I actually lived in the same neighborhood.
Oh, okay.
And whatever it was, I was like, let's go back. Like,
Yeah.
I'm familiar with it.
Yeah.
Kind of just don't bother people. They don't bother you.
You can get good rent over there too, and it's right at the tip of that triangle of the city where you kind of blossom out into the other. Anyway, so I'm familiar with Youth and Canvas as a two-piece sort of bluesy rock kind of thing, right? How do you usually describe that to people that, like, if you're booking a tour, for example?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We're a two-piece. A lot of my favorite bands and inspiration have come from bands like the White Stripes or the Black Keys, Death from Above.
I saw them once. They are so loud.
I've seen them about 10 or 15 times, and it's just incredible. And just one of the main appeals.
I've seen all those bands, I should say. But definitely Death from Above is probably the more abstract. And really good.
But it always caught my attention because some of these bands, I didn't even know they were two-piece bands until I, researched them further or saw them in concert. And I was like, this is two
When
people.
Black Keys first came out, I thought it was 5 old black dudes.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? It was 2 white kids from...
And granted, some of these bands use, dubs
the studio,
and stuff, but still, like, they're doing it. And
that's a fun part of the Black Keys show is they have extra guitar players and a keyboards and stuff now,
right?
But they'll
Touring
do a
band.
piece. They'll do a piece of the set as just the two of them.
Right.
They'll do a handful of songs or whatever that way, and it's still so much fun.
Yeah. Well, and there's this band I got really big into, based out of Austin. They're called Black Pistol Fire, and they're one of the best bands I've ever seen live. Super high energy, really just kind of stomping, gritty. Rock set, but it's just 2 guys, and the lead singer plays out of 3 separate amps.
Yeah.
And when I first saw that, I was like that's how you can make this possible, is get a full sound, a nice big sound, and I mean the drummer's just super high energy. He plays with marching sticks.
Yeah.
Because he just...
The big thick ones.
Yeah. Because he just beats the hell out of the set, but it's possible to have a really high energy, really like musically entertaining show with just 2 people.
Absolutely.
And once I started kind of seeing all that, like I said, I've always been big into the White Stripes, just the sound, the blues, and kind of like a garage rocky style.
It was such a great alternative because you and me are similar enough in age that when that was sort of happening, the other thing that was happening which sounded totally different. Like the other kind of music that was coming out at that time was much more processed. It was mostly drums and vocals and white noise in the middle.
Right.
So when you're learning to play guitar, you can't. It's hard to listen to Fall Out Boy and pick out the guitar lines unless it's a lead or something, or unless it's a riff, because typically it's just the chords underneath and it's made to sound good on radio. And a lot of those bands at that time didn't sound good live.
Right.
And then when you go to those mixes, it kind of feels that way. So I remember I was a huge White Stripes fan.
Oh yeah.
I saw them in 2005 at the Fox when I was like 15, and that was a big foundation for me too. I did my thing as a 2-piece for a long time. Me and Chris, who I started my first band with, he's still playing with me. He'll be playing with me next Friday at the Heavy Anchor, shameless plug. And we have a bass player now, so I can take solos and stuff. But that's a big part of that thing too. Is I did a record with my friend Lucius, who lives in Maryland right now, but we were a two-piece for that same reason, that, you know, you use the octave thing to your advantage and try to just fill that space and if you can keep the drums busy enough.
Well, and that was one of my things too. Like I really like catchy riffs.
Yeah.
Like chords are fine. That's great.
Yeah.
There's a finite number of chords, so to speak.
Yeah.
And, you know, obviously there's like standards and stuff like that. That just never did it for me. But what kind of caught my interest with the White Stripes was you listen to half of their songs from the early albums and it's like, this is all just basic standard blues.
Yeah.
But you don't know that unless you're listening for it.
And it makes it so attainable. Like before your ears really developed, like now we can appreciate more intricate stuff.
Yeah.
But when you're like first learning how to play guitar and you can't really decipher all the different noises anyway,
right.
having just, you could pick out the guitar part and the drums are super simple to follow along with, and you could focus on the actual core of the thing.
Well, and like, so like Ball and Biscuit was one of the first songs I heard by White Stripes where I listened to it and I was like, this is just basic 12-bar blues. That's all it is.
Yeah.
But I'm like, he kills it. Like, you don't think about that for a second when you're listening to the song. Like, I'm not like, oh, this is just a boring...
there's a nice underdub of the of a rhythm guitar over the solo parts, you know, and just enough to keep the space, but they pull it off live too.
Oh, yeah.
With even when it's just the drums and the guitar solo, it's a lot of fun. And so it's so captivating, but me and Joe were just talking about this. Joe is in the booth, ladies and gentlemen, and about how you get so caught up in the performance and how something sounds, but maybe you don't necessarily make the composition as deep or as innovative as it could be. But in that case, it was like, well, let's just do a 12-bar thing. They probably I think that one they made up in the studio while they were doing that record. But it had a new life to it in a way that was like, how do you do that?
And one of my things too when I'm like writing songs, well, it used to be like this, but I've kind of tried to train myself out of it, was like, obviously when you write a song and you put something together and you know how it's structured, you get that kind of that thought process of, well, maybe it's too easy, maybe it's not complex enough, maybe it's because you know how it's written and you know it just seems kind of boring and dull. But when I hear songs like that, and I'm like, this is just the basic blue, like, even as a musician who could dissect the song, I'm still captivated.
Yeah.
So it tells me, like, that is possible if you have the right energy, and it's like, you can write whatever you want.
It's more about the delivery.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that one specifically has a swag to it that I don't think we had that word at the time, but this is like 20 years ago that record came out. Yeah. But that's the thing. It had like kind of a swag to it that was new and just not as high stress as the other stuff that was on at the time. Yeah. Sort of like the Strokes had that similar thing. They weren't nearly as blues influenced.
Right.
But at that same time, and a lot of the vocals are more relaxed and sort of a grimier energy than like the pop punk thing that was going on at the same time. Alongside that was just totally different. It's like a totally different category of music. It's kind of weird to even compare the two. I'm just thinking chronologically. Yeah. You know.
Well, and like I said before, like one of my other favorite bands was Death from Above. Yeah. And my older sister actually really got me into them when their first album, and it was I got into their first album, and then they broke up. Yeah. And I was like devastated because I was like, I'm never going to see these guys. Like I was so heavily, like I was just enthralled because it's a bassist and a drummer. Right. The drummer sings. Yeah. It's like, what is this band?
But then the other guy's kind of the mastermind of the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. It's wild, but like it's little like nuances like that where it's like they make this work. They write really good songs. It's high energy. It's really captivating, and it also just presents how possible it is to do something. You could be a one-man band, you know what I mean? Like it's just,
like St. Vincent's doing that now, where she does, her two Kempers synced up with her MacBook in Ableton, and she has choreography, and it's just her and her guitar, and the whole thing, which is a style. Insane. I like her with a band too, but and I think even if you I like when people like Justin Timberlake makes really electronic focused music. A lot of there's a lot of processing stuff that happens, but on tour he's got a big band because part of the fun, the novelty of, if you're going to see live music, might as well go see it. Right. But when you're innovating and you're really trying to sell the composition, you can deliver all those things. You know what I mean, yourself as one person, especially now with things you can do with programming drums and how intelligent those can be. And we've seen like the people with the loopers, and that kind of style also. But it's almost easier to do it that way than it is to do it with just one other musician and do it all live.
Well, see, and that was another part of the appeal of doing a two-piece, because I was like, I have a rhythm, drums and percussion, and then if I can do melodies and the harmonies and sing whatever, it made it really possible to make touring a lot easier. Yeah, also. I mean, the first drummer I had in Austin, he just had his kit, and we had my amps and a guitar and my pedal board, and we could fit in a sedan. Yeah. And, we both we both
And you would.
yeah, and I mean we prioritize that. So like
Do you remember the Dodge Magnum?
I don't.
It was like the Charger up front.
Oh, yes,
but it was
I
like
do.
a station wagon in the back. And in the commercial, he said, "Yeah, I got a guitar and an amp and some 2x4s." Like he had a guitar and an amp in the car.
Right.
To show you, I'm like, are they making that for me?
Yeah, right.
They didn't catch on because it's a station wagon.
Right.
But, that's what that reminded me.
But
of.
that was basically it though. And he had a job in the service industry, and I was doing just rideshare stuff. For that reason, like we could take off whenever we wanted. We could go on month-long tours. We could, drop of a hat, we would be ready to do a show. I made some really good friends in Austin, and I was like, hey, like, you guys want to play a show in a couple weeks? And the dude was like, there's 5 members in their band. He's like, well, I don't know if I can get off work. I haven't talked to my bassist in 3 weeks. I go, you're in the same, like, aren't you guys friends? Like, you're in the band together.
Yeah.
And it was like, these really great bands I love playing with, but it was such a chore to get everyone together and sync up
and
schedules.
You're not as used to it because of the
get off work.
Guy.
And and my drummer and I lived together. So like I'd get an email. I'm like, hey man, you want to play Hotel Vegas on the 13th? He's like, yeah, let's do it. And I'm like that was perfect because like that's what I wanted to do.
How long were you in Austin?
4 years.
And so what prompted the move there?
Was it be in St. Louis?
Yeah, just to try to do it somewhere else.
Yeah, try something different. I had heard things here and there about Austin. I've been there once, and I didn't know this beforehand, but like after I moved, I kind of realized how quickly Austin was growing. It was becoming this big up-and-coming trendy city. A lot of tech companies were moving out there, and I didn't know any of that. And so I'm there, and I'm seeing all these
that was
people.
happening even before the most recent mass exodus to Austin.
Oh yeah, like it's just been
happening that way anyway.
Yeah,
because Nashville's having a similar thing. Where
Portland.
Me and my wife were going to Nashville a lot because I had an aunt that would work down there part of the month, so we would just stay with her and then go and do the Nashville thing. I ate like a bunch of chicken one week, and then we'd go do the music thing. But I noticed that their growth isn't supported yet by the infrastructure.
That's exactly the
especially because the commercial suburbs are like Brentwood and Nashville are blossoming so much because you have all these young professionals that want to come there and they just want an alternative to the other metropolitan areas.
Right.
And Nashville has a lot to offer. It's got universities. It's robust. Like it's not just a country music place.
Right.
On Austin, I'm sure is the same way. I haven't been. Not for any reason. I haven't not been on purpose, but
it's all right.
But a similar thing, right? And so there's this young professional kind of scene seeping in all the time.
Yep.
And it's kind of interrupting the identity of the place.
And that was the cool thing. So when I did like ride sharing in Austin, it was cool because I was picking up people who just moved there. I picked up people who lived there 30 years, and they were like, this isn't even the same city. And I learned so much about it. And part of the thing was like 30 years ago, Austin was 200,000 people.
Yeah.
And so they don't have a really efficient public transit. There's like one single train track that just goes north and south. The buses aren't that efficient. And now it's the 10th largest city in the country.
Yeah.
It's like over 1 million people. And people have been saying, the infrastructure just wasn't built for that. They didn't need it. It was a little horse and buggy town, dirt roads with UT there. And like, that was it. They're like, 30 years ago, it wasn't even on a map. It was Dallas and Houston, and that was it. So now it kind of blossomed into
InfoWars.
Yeah, right. So now it turned into this big like hub and this big tech hub, and a lot of companies are moving out there, and the prices are skyrocketing, and it's just that's how I could have held that rideshare job for so long, was because so many people moved there, but no one could get rid of their cars because the public transit was non-existent.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like job security for me, but at the same time, it's like you're also keeping more cars on the road for the rideshare jobs.
Right.
And like,
Did the traffic get bad?
Oh my God. Like,
because they're not used to it.
Yeah. Well, and like Highway 35 is the main, it goes like all the way from Austin to Dallas. And that's just, at times, it's just like a 4-lane highway. And it's like there's just no support for it.
That's just not how that's supposed to be.
It was one of those things where it's like if like when I first moved there, I got a house in South Austin, and I was looking for jobs, didn't know much about the city. I applied at a place in North Austin, and she said, did you find a place to live yet? And I told her where it was, and she told me, she said, honestly, I probably won't even hire you based on that. Because if you're new here and you're not used to our traffic, you're going to be late so often.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to have to like fire you. Like, she's like, it's that bad. She's like, I highly recommend finding
a place near where
and
you're
it was
work.
like a 20-minute drive. I was like, really? Like that,
but in the morning commute,
it was that bad.
Yeah.
And it was like, if someone asked you to be somewhere at 6 o'clock, make it 10.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way you're gonna get there in time.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. And like I said, like I was paying like $900 for a single room in a 3-bedroom house.
In a house, so just the room.
Just the room.
Yeah. Because there's just not the property to accommodate the growth.
Yeah, and it was, like I said, well, and the other thing too, like obviously it had a history for being a music town. So I was like, oh, that's got something going for it. And now it's just a lot of these, so there's Red River Street, and that's like the cultural music district, and there's a ton of venues along Red River, and that's kind of where you go to see a lot of local live music. And everyone knows that. And there's some outdoor stages and stuff. And in the recent years, there's apartments and condos on Red River, and tenants had started complaining about the noise. And they started implementing noise ordinances on Red River at like 10 and 11 p.m. And we're like, this is the live music capital of the world.
Right.
You moved here because of that appeal.
Can you just do it quieter?
Like, yeah, and we're like, it was
Can you just turn all 3 of your amps down?
It was just turn the venue down.
Can you just Can we put oven mitts on the front of it?
Yeah, and it was kind of this weird like limbo of like concerts were ending early, no one could be outside, and and then on top of that, so now that the real estate's starting to pop up and it's these expensive condos, now venues are closing, they're getting bought up, and they're building condominiums there.
Well, because and the rent's going to run up. So if you own a venue,
it's insane.
But you don't own if you own a venue, but you don't own a building, building, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's going to be really easy to get. She's like, well, listen, we could just put a Starbucks here, and they can pay $9,000 a month in rent.
It's and then a lot of people that true Austinites were like, well, they're just selling our venues. They don't care about this, that, and the other. And like a lot of people were saying, you can own property here and not be from here. It could be some dude in LA that gets an offer for 3 times what he paid. And, not even care that it's historically significant. He's like, yes, like it's business. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the other problems, too, is a lot of these people own properties that weren't, true Austinites that were just in it for the business. And it's like, you can't blame them. Like, that's just what's going to happen.
Right.
And we started noticing that pretty rapid. Even in the 4 years I was there, like, I didn't want to be one of those people that was like, oh, you don't know what it was like 2 whole years ago when I got people that have been there, for 30 years. But it happened that fast. And it was just wild. Like, you could see it in real time, just how quickly it was growing. And that was kind of one of the factors where, at the time I was living month to month. And I was like, I can't. I was working like 50, 60 hours a week just to survive.
Yeah, and renting a single room.
It was nuts.
Yeah.
It was... So yeah, it was nice. I get it. Like, I get the appeal now from an outs. Like, I see what attracts people there. But after having lived there and it's different once, these people visit once, they get stars in their eyes and they want to move there. But once you actually live in it, have to find a place to rent, get a job, commute.
And that was the thing with Nashville with us is we went like 3 times and saw the pattern growing of the growth and the infrastructure problem. And just, you walk into a 7-Eleven and there's a line all the way down the aisle any time of day, just because we need more 7-Elevens or something. You know what I mean? And so I'm just thinking like, okay, so if this keeps up, do I really want to live here? Do I really want to, like, I got stuck trying to pick up pizza from a cool place, but like in the arena traffic was letting out, and so I was just like, I had just a horde of suburban Tennesseans crawling over my car.
Well, and luckily Austin doesn't have any pro sports teams. I couldn't even imagine what it would be like. They have UT football, which is a religion there.
Oh, sure.
But I was like, I couldn't even imagine.
But they don't have, if they had like an NFL team or an NHL team.
They're getting a soccer team, but yeah, it was just crazy.
Oh, they would get a soccer team.
Right.
They're going to get curling before they get NFL.
And then, so on top of that, last year when the pandemic hit, so South by Southwest is every March in Austin, and that's like the biggest thing that happens. It brings like 300,000 people over the course of 10 days. It's like a $500 million, revenue to the city. It's massive. And when the pandemic's kind of started rolling out and everyone was kind of paying attention to
I remember
the
when
news,
they canceled it finally. And
we were watching that live.
Yeah.
Like, my drummer and I were at our practice space, and we were talking to the guys at the front desk, and they had it pulled up like on the news, and we saw them announce that South by got canceled. And that was like when it clicked for a
what
ton
time of year
of
was
people.
that?
What's that?
What time of year was that?
It was March.
Oh, so it was that early.
It was.
What time is Southwest usually?
It's like the second week of March to the like third. It's 10 days, so it's like
it's in March.
Yeah, so it was like March 9th to the
That's right. So they had to cancel it like kind of last minute.
Yeah,
because everything that was March 13th was the Friday where they were like, Monday everything's shutting down.
Right.
You can't get it this weekend, but Monday. And so because I remember I was playing at the casino every Friday, and that was the vibe. Was like, oh, this is our last thing for a couple weeks. You know what I mean? And so I didn't realize South by was supposed to be that close to that.
Well, and I think a lot of people didn't believe it was going to get canceled because it's such a huge endeavor. it's such a big production.
Oh, it's such a big, it's its own
massive.
economy.
I mean, so when they canceled it, my drummer at the time, he actually worked at a pretty prominent venue down there called Barracuda Club. Actually, I'm wearing the shirt right now.
I'm about to say, you are swagged out for this. I feel we're doing this audio only because of the locale, and I wanted to get it out in time to spread the news before the show, but you got your heavy anchor hat on.
It's my daily.
That's really?
Yeah.
So you had that already?
Yeah, I did.
Because it's in pretty good shape.
Yesterday, I was actually wearing the hat and the shirt, and I didn't realize it.
Those are the best hats with the little captain's ribbony
I'll
thing.
I'll have this on Saturday, the 24th.
That's July 24th at the Heavy Anchor on Gravois, right here in Bevo.
With Blinded by Stereo.
Blinded by Stereo, Youth and Canvas, the homecoming extravaganza.
Right.
So that club.
So my drummer at the time, he actually worked at Barracuda Club, and he was kind of telling me, because he kind of knew the ins and outs of the industry, that it was like a lot of venues can be in the red before South by. That's just the nature of the industry. And when South by comes, the South by followed by the summer, like
the summer season,
schedules, that carries them through till next March.
Yeah,
he's like that. Everyone needs
it's like
that.
Selling ice cream. It's like you're really in business for.
He's like
half
everyone likes that push. It's a huge boost in revenue. Like he's like, we're all in the red before this happens.
The scene wouldn't be sustainable without it.
Case in point.
Yeah.
So it got canceled, and sure enough, one by one, venues closing, close.
Well, because even if you plan to reopen, even if it's your career and you really want to you can't be paying rent until that whole time,
right,
being forced to be closed.
Well, and like I was saying before, like some of these people, the actual owner of the property may not even live in Austin, and so you got these owners of these clubs that are still paying rent themselves, and a lot of these property owners. I mean, you saw all the stuff in the news where it's like some people weren't doing rent forgiveness. They were like, not my problem.
Yeah.
Like, sorry.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're out the money too.
And, luckily, one of these owners of the clubs, they let him out of the lease and were a little bit more lenient on him, thankfully. But you just saw it left and right. These venues were closing, and it was hard to believe. And it was and that was the other thing too, is there's no timeline. It's not like, hey, pandemic from 2020 to 2021, March, sit tight for a year. It's like no one knows. And in the industry of music and booking shows, that's something you have to do months in advance.
Yeah.
So even if we open up now, you're not going to have shows till September.
They're not going to be full.
October, you know what I mean?
Especially touring things, it takes months to get those things together, which is why now you're seeing the big push for fall.
Yeah, it's September and October.
You know what I mean? Because everyone's just like, we can't wait a whole year.
I know.
Because the demand is so crazy. You're getting these crazy offers.
It's wild.
But nobody can get up on the road that quick because you got to have a crew who hasn't worked in 18 months.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Assuming the band's
production
all together.
Yeah. Well, and I know some people
and that's assuming everyone's vaccinated and ready to move on, which is you also can't assume.
Right. Well, I mean, even just going through an unprecedented thing like the pandemic in general, personally, and even myself, I know people who, it hits people differently, and it's it's very hopeless when you're like, I want to keep writing music, I have these ideas, but then it's like, why?
Yeah, what am I going to do with it?
So for example, my first drummer, things that we're on good terms. It wasn't between us; it was between our roommate.
Yeah.
But he ended up having to move back to St. Paul, and this was in 2019. So I was left without a drummer, and we had already started working on our second album. So luckily, I found another drummer in Austin who was actually from here.
Oh wow!
Who have a bunch of mutual friends in common. My buddy AJ, and we started writing our second album.
Yeah.
So we wrote our second album. We went into the studio in April of 2020. So it was right after the pandemic started picking up. We didn't know how serious it was going to be. Recorded our whole second album. To this day, we haven't played a show together.
Yeah.
Because that was in the height of the pandemic. It's like, how are we going to promote this? How are we going to tour?
Yeah.
What's the point of even writing music?
Finishing it.
Yeah. So what? Who knows when we're going to be able to... So, bunch of things happened. The decision to move back here, I was all over I had lived in Austin. I lived back here for 4 months. My partner lived back home in Maryland for 2 months. I came back and forth, I had some family emergencies, this and that and the other. It was absolutely insane. And at one point, I think maybe my fiance Emily, I think maybe they thought I didn't want to move back here, and I thought they didn't want to move back here. But we kind of approached it hey, what if? And we were both like, why not?
Yeah.
Like I said, we were trying to move to Philly. I really like the scene out there, especially for touring.
Really?
We've got New York, Boston, Rhode Island
for the whole East Coast thing.
I met a lot of great people out there. But more realistically,
Just
we're
take
like,
a raft down to Miami.
yeah, right. I mean, it would work, you know.
Yeah.
But we're like, it's a middle pandemic. We're trying to move to a new city. We have no connections. We don't know anyone there. We're on unemployment. So who's going to give us a job and a place to live? So it was this whole thing. And we're like, why don't we just try moving back to St. Louis? It is cheaper here.
Yeah.
Save up some money, get a place together. Luckily, an old buddy of mine owned properties, the one we're in now.
Yeah.
And he gave us a good deal on it. And
Sure.
he's like, I got this place available in March if you want to move in. And we're like, sold. Like, it all kind of worked. Like, things all kind of fell into place weirdly to where it came together.
St. Louis is a great place for the apocalypse.
It is.
We've been practicing for a long time.
It's a great place to have a home base.
Well, that's what I just talked to my brother-in-law into buying a house here because his family historically is not necessarily from here, but so he was like, oh, maybe I want to move to LA or maybe I want to travel. I'm like, you can afford to do all that and have a little place here.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And then, because if you live in LA, you can't afford to go to all the other places you want to go.
That's exactly what
because
Austin
you're living
was
in
like,
the, yeah. And so if you're strapped that thin,
right.
You know what I mean? You need a place to, where you can come back and your broken motorcycle will still be in the garage and you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Things like that.
Well, and I mean, like I said before, I was paying like $900 for a room. And here, I mean, my rent's like a third of what it was.
Right.
And like, it's just, pragmatically, that was the best decision.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of financial freedom, kind of let things go. And that's the other thing, too, is like, if we want to go somewhere, it'll always be there.
Yeah.
And St. Louis will always be here.
Sure.
So what's the, if we want to move somewhere, we can go try it out. If we like it, that's great. If not, we can come right back.
You only sign leases for 6 or 12 months, sometimes longer. But
well, and it wasn't like we'd never left St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, she was from Maryland and moved out here and went to Webster, and that's where we met.
Oh, cool.
But since then, there had been. She went to San Jose, New Orleans, New York, like all over the place. Mm-hmm. And so it's not like we'd never left our hometowns. It's like we already did it.
Yeah.
We saw what it was like. Yeah, we saw what it was like. We gave it a shot.
And that's one thing me and Joe talk about on the podcast all the time is that you got to give yourself permission to make the later decisions later.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't have to commit to St. Louis forever to be here right now.
And I didn't... And I was in this incorrect mindset of once I'd moved to Austin, I was like, well, I never want to go back to St. Louis because that's a step back. And I don't want to... If I move from Austin, I want to go somewhere new.
Yeah.
But, as you learn and experience things, it's like, if I move back here, I'm not stuck here forever. I can just as easily move as I did the first time.
Right.
And it'll be easier because I've already moved away from my hometown.
Right.
Like, the first time was hard, I'll admit. Like, it's scary. Like, I've lived here.
But now you don't have that barrier.
Yeah.
Now you're like, you can always come back.
It's always here.
Yeah, that type of thing.
We've got friends. Like, as soon as I came back, some of my best friends were like, you need a job? I got you on a job.
Right.
I got a property.
Yeah.
This, that, and the other. Like, whatever. So that's, like, the nice sense of relief.
Having the familiarity.
Always,
just have a safety net just to know that, like, you have those relationships in place that, if you need to borrow a van or something.
Right.
So I love the idea that, so this isn't just your first show with Youth and Canvas back in St. Louis. It's also your first show with the drummer.
With the new drummer.
Yeah.
Correct. So before I moved...
So is the new material coming out?
It is. So our second album that we put out is out. Everything's out.
It is out.
Streaming.
Okay,
so it came out in September last year.
Okay, so that's the one. I didn't know if there was one since then.
So we put it out, and like I said, we couldn't schedule any shows. It was just kind of out there.
Yeah. Which I'm also for, because it's not like, the release date is as big of a deal as once it's out. It's like, no, it's out. You can have it immediately.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right. So that's out there. Where I'm working on new stuff now for the third album. So when I ended up moving back here, my new drummer, my buddy Brad, I've known him for like 15 years. Mm-hmm. Like, we went to school together. We were in drumline together. Bros. So we did a couple things before I moved years and years ago, like just bands we were in. We did some cover band stuff. We did, we jammed together, and we'd like throw ideas back and forth.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to do stuff with him because he's amazingly talented, and he just, he never got the time to do it much. He's actually had gotten married in the past year. They're expecting a child, so there's a lot of things he's got going on. So I came back and I made a post. I was like, hey guys, like, I'm back. I've still got material cooking. I'm looking for a drummer. Someone hit me up, and luckily he got a hold of me. He's like, hey man, like, I'll have a busy schedule in a few months because I'll have the kid here, but I'm down to do whatever. Like, I want to get back out there and start doing stuff. We had 2 practice sessions, I think, and he had everything down already. Like, he's like,
that's what you mentioned when I reached out to you about this. So I had a different band lined up to kind of headline the show, and then they kind of fell apart, and as bands do, and so I don't did I know you were already back? Maybe I knew you were back.
Maybe I think I met you after I met Clay.
Well, no, I'm thinking you. Yeah, Clay's my brother. He's been on the podcast too. I made that post probably about needing a band for then, and so that's,
yeah.
You were just saying, dude, we just now figured out that we could probably do something that soon. So it was really hot off the press.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting.
Well, and I've always just been, like I said, like drop of a hat. It's kind of nice to be able to do that and not have to check with 5 people. Be like, hey, can we all get off work? Can we all get together? Can we have practice before that?
Even one extra person makes it that much harder. It makes it at least 33% harder.
Well, and now my buddy Brad, he's been in the service industry all his life, and now he's actually he's a paramedic. Like he's been going to EMS school and stuff. Yeah. So that's even. I was like, he's on like 12-hour on-call shifts and stuff like that. Yeah. So I was like, if you can make this work, like, let's do it. Yeah. So luckily it came together. Like I said, we have a couple jam sessions. It's down. Like I'm really excited about it. So this will be our first show in St. Louis since I've been back. It'll be my first show in general in over 2 years.
Oh, really?
Because our last tour was like spring of 2019. Then we started writing the next album. He had to move. And then you were moved back to St. Paul in June of 2019. So I was in this limbo.
I didn't realize it was that long ago.
Yeah, and then I found another drummer, and he learned all the songs, and we both wrote the second album. And then after that, it's like I moved here, so it was like.
So this is a third drummer.
Yeah, I'm gonna have 3 albums with 3 drummers.
Well, no, but that's that's the driving force. That makes sense. I mean, all for that's going to be a great comparison.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I mean, what I like about it too is like my whole thing has been like, I know some people who in bands are like lead guys, like give direction or they have ideas for this, and that's great. Like that's cooperative, whatever. And my whole thing has been like, write whatever you want. I don't like that's what makes the band.
Yeah.
If I write something and I hear a drum beat in my head with it, but you want something different because that's either what you like or what you're more comfortable with.
Yeah.
That's what gives us our sound of 2 musicians. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just me telling you what to play.
That's exactly what me and Chris go through. Because like I'll write a very specific drum part on like digitally just to kind of not play to a click and just give him an idea of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And he'll do something totally different. And my impulse may be, I have demo-itis and I want it to be the way I thought it was going to be.
Right.
But that's not why I play with him. I could just put it out with
exactly. You
the
can do
fake
it with
drums
the
on
drum
it. Yeah. I mean,
or little bits here where it's like, hey, like when I come in here, like.
And there's a conversation.
Yeah,
that's the production
that's
aspect.
Being a band is, and he's always on board for it. But
there's a reason you're asking him to play drums,
right?
And so you want to celebrate. And I think that's important for people to give themselves permission to in their own endeavors too. Is just celebrate like the unexpected things that they're going to bring to it. You know what I mean? That's the fun part.
Well, and I'm interested. Obviously, we don't. We're not like in a big public spotlight where people are like critiquing our music and stuff, but it's interesting to me because
we're gonna critique it.
Well, Shane had his own style of drumming and it was great. Like he was a big White Stripes fan as well, and Black Keys and all them, so he kind of brought that to the table, which I liked. It doesn't need to be over complex. You don't need double bass pedals and all this stuff. Just something that gives a beat, fill every now and then, and I liked it. I like keeping it simple. AJ, my second drummer, is also he also plays like guitar like crazy. But he listens to a lot heavier metal stuff like that. So he's kind of got like the quick bass and the cymbals, and it's awesome. Like if you listen to it in the second album, you'll see what he brought to it, and like the breakdowns are just really heavy because that was his style.
Fun.
I think that's awesome.
You ever listen to Royal Blood?
Yeah, and that's one of my. That's one of my comparisons just for the broader scope, just so more people have an idea. I don't think we're a lot like them, but that's
also
the same
thing where you can't necessarily tell it's just 2 dudes.
Right, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, especially with an octave pedal, like I can drop low and play low heavy bass parts, or like on Royal Blood because he's a bassist. He can crank it up. It sounds like a guitar part or like melodies. And that's awesome. And we are kind of like that. Like we have like it's kind of like a heavier, bluesier kind of like. I was doing.
It's not retro at all.
No,
it's got the blues edge, but it's modern.
I don't like saying blues just because I don't want people to think like B.B. King or something because it's not. Yeah. But like the only reason I say that is because 99.99% of my stuff is written in pentatonic scale.
Yeah.
So it sounds bluesy. You throw a blue note in there, like it's along those lines. But it's I was gonna say I was working one day and I picked up a guy when I was doing Lyft. And he asked to listen to it, and he said it sounded like garage rock gut punched by the Blues, which is in our bio, because I just thought that was
great.
a cool little, like, that was a neat way to explain it.
He should write
it
for
was
Pitchfork. They could use some of that magic over there.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I never thought of it that way, because I do like the garage rock aspect, kind of like Jack White, where it's not fine-tuned, it's not polished, it's like... That's why I don't like some like overly done studio recordings. It's too clear cut. It's too crisp, and I don't like that. I kind of like the raw rowdiness,
especially as a guitar player, because really to sit in a really intricate mix with a dozen other instruments in a way that's musical and it sounds good coming out of a speaker or out of headphones or something. The guitar is going to have a lot of frequencies cut away.
Yes.
That if there's less instruments, you don't have to cut so much.
Right.
And it's also going to be quieter than guitar players like to be. Like, when I'm recording guitars, the first thing I do is like cut everything by like 10 dB.
Yeah.
Because I know that, you know what I mean, my impulse is all the way up. And if you listen to the first record I did all by myself, that I do with my friend Lindsay in our band Too Deep. It's definitely, the drums are super loud, the cymbals are super loud, and the guitar riffs are super loud. It's like, well, there's some nuance that we were missing. We were missing some nuance there. But when it's just the two of you, you have more room to kind of play with it. You get more of that fun. You get more of the upfront of the guitar because there's less. You're not trying to also keep in touch like a feminine vocal or like a string part or some keyboards or something.
Well, and that, so like I always think, like, if you listen to like Royal Blood or something, like, they're good. They are definitely more like a poppy style, which is fine. But like that's really clean, really like clear cut, poppy, riffy, tight drums, and that's fine. That sounds good. But I like a balance between that and just like Jack White in his living room recording, or like
their first record.
Through an amp he built himself.
Did you know today is Bastille Day? It's the White Stripes anniversary.
I forgot, actually.
I just realized that on my way here, which is so funny that we keep talking about them. But like their first record, like there's so much bleed through between the guitar and the drums,
but it's great.
So much reverb because of how they mic the guitar. You're getting, it's like it sounds like the Heavy Anchor kind of like your amp is so loud in that room like that.
Oh yeah, it's so.
That's an environment where if they had two other musicians on that album, that guitar tone wouldn't have made sense.
Not at all.
It would have sounded bad.
Yeah. Well, and another reason I like, when I got inspired when I saw that guy using 3 amps, that just opened up a whole other thing. Because
like gave you permission to do that.
Yeah, because and that's when it was one of those, like, how did I not see this before? And so I started setting up my pedal board to where, so I typically play out of 2 guitar amps and a bass amp. And I run them to all 3, and I have an ABC switch pedal, so I can turn some off and turn some on. And it was like, if we have a part in a song that's like building up, I'll just play out of 1 amp, and then as we're going, I'll click on the 2nd amp, and then to make it like a really big hit, I can click on that bass amp, and it's just this like boomy, huge just attack. And I started putting certain pedals that only go to the bass amp, certain distortion pedals that only go through 1 guitar amp, an octaver that only goes to this guitar amp, so it's not like over flooded and
yeah. So you have 3 kind of separate.
It's crazy. Like I had just never thought that way before, and that just totally changed the whole way I started doing things, because I was like, you can create all kinds of dynamics and all kinds of things. Like there's a part in one of our songs where we're playing, and I just cut out the guitar amps, and it's just this deep, low bass riff for a couple measures, and it's all quiet. And then all of a sudden you kick everything back on and it just comes back in. And it's like, there's so much you can do
with like, just that stuff.
With just that. And
it's 5 people's worth of gear.
Yeah.
But just 2 dudes.
It's crazy. I really like fangirl about it myself, but like it's great.
Fun.
Like,
and there's a lot of guitar players that listen to the show, and so and so I showed you, like, I have all those amps in my basement right now. And stuff that like no, it's definitely not lost on us at all here. So where can people find most of Youth and Canvas's stuff in the meantime?
Yeah, we're on everything. We're on Apple Music, we're on Spotify, Bandcamp, SoundCloud, Instagram, Facebook. It's just our name straight up. Everything's free to stream.
And so we should start with the most recent record it's an LP from last year?
Yeah, Drag You Down.
What's it, 10 songs?
8.
8, okay.
8, yeah. Put that out last year. I had been listening to a lot of kind of more in the punk realm, which is kind of what our third album is going to be more like. A little bit faster paced, but a lot of Idols. Again, more Death from Above.
Yeah.
Turnstile, Frank Carter.
Yeah.
A lot of those bands. It's just
Engelbert.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just. I'm just looking for more.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to like do stuff and then kind of tone it down.
Fun,
like
is trying to explore
more
like how much you could do with the same pieces.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and I'm not a singer. I'll be the first to admit I'm not. I can hit a key, but it's not going to be in tune. And I kind of realized that after the first album, where I liked the riff and I liked the music, but I couldn't really sing over that. And so what I started doing, I kind of found my niche of, you listen to bands like Modest Mouse or something. Isaac Brock cannot sing.
Right.
He just yells and
he's screaming. Yeah.
But the like timbre of his voice is very unique, and he's famous for that.
Right.
And there's even with punk bands who just scream, just yelling whatever they want. It's like that still has an audience. That is a style of singing.
Yeah.
You don't have to be, you don't have to have this beautiful harmonious voice to be a successful singer. And so I kind of cut back on the self-deprecation of like, you suck, you can't do this. Like, this doesn't sound good. And then it's like, just embrace it.
Yeah.
And so now...
just play to your strengths.
Exactly.
Because I think that's the thing now, especially, is so much of your audience is going to be people that are really into loud guitars and loud drums, and they're into that kind of... You know what I mean? And so they're not coming to be like, oh, is he a perfectly classically trained vocalist on top of that?
Right.
That I think the grime and some of the limitations, it's going to be the... I think that's for people that haven't heard Youth and Canvas before, I think that's part of the charm of the genre kind of or the blend of genres in general.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've never had any problem with your vocals.
Well, and again,
I'm okay with it.
It's fine.
I'll let it happen.
I've started to, because I would hear a melody and I would like stress out about how I could sing that. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I don't want to stress out about something I'm creating. I should make it to my strengths. And, again, you start listening to some of these punk bands who are just, like, off the wall. And it's like, if you really dissect it, it's like, he's just yelling. Like, I know there's, like, screamo bands who, like, that's an actual technique.
Different.
I totally get that. Like, I could never do that.
But they're replacing their technical precision with the kind of passion that they're trying to deliver.
Right.
And conveying the emotion on the record.
Idols was one of the biggest bands that really... made me understand, like...
And that's Billy Idol and his 4 brothers.
No.
Oh.
It's Billy Idol and his 3 brothers. No.
3, it's 3 of them?
Idols, IDLES. But yeah, it's this band from the UK, and like Joe Talbot, the lead, he's got this really, thick English accent. And you can hear it, because it's just like raw punk, where he's just like half talking, half yelling, half screaming.
It's almost like the Cake thing, where it's kind of it's a sing-song spoken word.
Right.
Like Cake, the vocalist from Cake has more in common with Nelly as a vocalist than he probably does with, Pavarotti or something.
Right.
You know what I mean?
But he makes it work.
Yeah,
and
totally.
And like,
one of my
as
favorite
a musician, I'm sure a lot of people do. You have these realizations listening to some of your favorite bands where it's like, wait a minute, like I could do that. Like these, they're just on such a pedestal because of their success, and you like their music and you look up to them, that it's kind of one of those like, I could never be them, I could never do that. But then it's like, you can just find what fits your style.
Especially the more you learn about all the pieces. You know what I mean? That you learn that, you don't have to be a platinum selling caliber singer on its own to be that successful, because it's about the whole package, right? And the whole combination of things. I mean, I use a lot of my instruments, as I started off as a singer when I was a kid, and then I use a lot of my instruments to kind of make up for that parts of the composition that if I was a masterful singer, I would just be Bobby McFerrin, and I wouldn't need all these guitar pedals.
So
I love Bobby McFerrin, but I wouldn't need all the guitar pedals and and keyboards and stuff like that, because I could just do it with my voice. But he's done that already. I like hitting buttons,
and that's one of, like I said before, like I like riff heavy. I like riffs, because that's what's catchy to me. Chords are fine, chords are great, but I don't want to just play some standard 4-chord, punk song where I'm just trying to sing or yell over it.
Right.
In that same vein, I'm also trying to find something else to compensate.
Yeah.
That people will enjoy listening to it, grooving to it, something that'll get stuck in your head.
That's the thing, because you can't just do one of the things.
Right.
You can have a really great message, but if it's in a package that's not as compelling, it's only going to be as good as the package it's in.
Well, and again, with like Death from Above, like all their stuff's riff heavy, and like that's another one of those things that got me, enthralled with them. It's like, this is this dude just shredding on the bass.
And when you're doing the riff thing, the 2-piece thing is easier. Because not just with the multiple amps and octave pedals and whatnot, but also that, you're not trying to, it's either chords or solos.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the riff is the composition, and that's what's captivating and driving people through it, even though it doesn't have a complex harmonic structure underneath it.
Well, one of the bonuses of just being two people too is like just to mix it up. Like I have like a what's it called? It's a whammy pedal. I don't think it's the Ricochet, but it's one of them. But it's just a drop tune. So you could drop it in different, whatever. So
drop.
It's like, I think it's just called that. But I use that to put songs in different keys just to mix it up. And I'm like, I played a whole song one time in a completely wrong key. But I was
I've
like,
done that.
Doesn't matter though, because I don't have anyone else.
Because you're not messing anybody else up.
I don't have anyone else to play with.
Because it happens when I'm doing cover stuff all the time, where it's like, oh, I started this a fourth up, then so now we have to catch up.
Right.
Whereas, if it's just you and a drummer, then it's. Or I've left a capo on before.
Sure.
When it was just me and a drummer, and be like, oh, so now this riff is.
This is what it is.
Completely different.
Right.
Because I'm playing open 3/5, but now it's. That's an F instead of an E.
Right.
Absolutely.
There were times too when I wrote a song, and like you writing, you kind of hear the melody in your head or kind of what you want to sing. And we would practice it, and there was one where the note was just out of reach. Like if I strained, I could hit it just barely. And I always dreaded that coming up, and sometimes I'd miss it and whatever. And before we actually recorded it, I was like, wait a minute. I can just change this.
Yeah.
So we went into the studio. I dropped it 2 half steps, and I hit it no problem. I was like, I can do that whenever I want.
Yeah,
like
I have the authority.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
So, but a lot of those bands that I listen to, it's just they just make it so. They just make it seem so possible and so like
that's
doable.
The goal.
And it's one of my favorite things too is like when you look at these celebrities.
We call it making it sound expensive.
Yeah, I mean. That's part of their job.
Yeah.
But like you see these celebrities in these bands that you look up to, and everyone thinks that like oh man, they're a genius, they're so smart, they do this, that, and the other. And one of my favorite things is like just watching interviews, and half the time these bands are like, I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
Or like one of my favorite bands is Pup. And
or listening to the isolated tracks.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you listen to like a David Lee Roth isolated vocal track, it's like, oh, that's not a classic rock icon, god level vocal
He's a
on
dude.
its own.
He's a dude.
He's a dweeb. He's, you know what I mean? He's a crazy old man screaming.
Right.
But it's fun when you put the guitars over it, you got the drums and the reverb, you know what I mean?
Well, and this band Pup, they had this song called Lionheart on their first album, which I really like. And I was at one of their shows once, and he's like, hey guys, like, I'm gonna be honest, like, we weren't even gonna play this because we hate it. And he goes, I don't even know what this song's about. Like, it's just made up gibberish. It's just words. And like that like blew my mind like in that moment because it also humanizes them when it's like they're just dudes. Yeah, they're good. They've done what they needed to do to gain the success and they've earned it.
To get the people in the door.
Right,
and so now that we know we're in a safe place, we can be a little more vulnerable and let you in on something.
But at the same time, it's like he's like, I just threw some words together. He's like, it doesn't mean anything to me.
That's like, how that's what like Chris Cornell always said about Black Hole Sun. He's like, I didn't know people were gonna like that song. It wasn't about anything. I just those are fun things to say.
Or Kings of Leon with like Sex on Fire.
Yeah.
Like I've been a huge Kings of Leon fan for years. And we're actually covering one of their songs, July 24th.
July 24th at the Heavy Anchor?
Blinded by Stereo,
Youth and Canvas, The Homecoming. July 24th.
But like they did an interview about Sex on Fire or something. He's like, I don't know. He goes, it just sounded stupid.
It sounded great.
It just sounded silly. Like,
You're asking me about it.
He's like, it just came out. He's like, I don't know what it means. Like, and it's crazy that like once you gain that following, you can just not do whatever you want, but you can kind of do whatever you want. Yeah. And it's, as long as you earn and keep that respect from your fans.
If you do it confidently,
right?
You know what I mean?
That's
like,
what it is.
If you ever listen to something really silly, like one of my favorite songs, which may be on Jacob V's favorite songs for July 2021 on Spotify, is "If You Must" by Del the Funky Homo Sapien.
I have not. Heard
It's such a groovy, like underground hip hop track kind of sound, but it's goofy.
Yeah.
So it's like it's that thing of like if you didn't speak English, it would just be like, oh, this is a jam. But speaking English is like he's talking about you got to brush your teeth, right?
Well, and I actually heard it was funny because I actually heard an interview with him, and they were talking about obviously he's on the Gorillaz track, and apparently someone else had recorded his verse, like a verse instead of him, or they were going to.
Yeah.
But they like went with him last minute.
Yeah.
And he was just. He's like, all right, well, here it is, whatever. He didn't think anything would come from it, and he like didn't even know how much of a hit it was. Well, until someone came to him and they were like,
it didn't say featuring. On it, you know what I mean?
And he like he was surprised by how big that was, and he's like, I just went in and rapped, like I just did what I did. But it's like just little things like that, like it's. when like these superstars are like humanized, it's refreshing. As like cliche as that sounds, but it's like you build in your head that they're rock stars, like, you know, they get taken care of, they're geniuses, they got this, they're these virtuosos and stuff, and then it's like I see them just talking to a person and they're like, oh yeah, I accidentally came up with that riff.
Yeah, we
like,
didn't even or like Ball and Biscuit, one of my favorite songs of all time. I play it all the time when I play, you know, with cover stuff or whatever. They threw it together in studio like that. You know what I mean? It's like maybe my favorite song on that record, and that was a huge album for them.
Yeah.
And to think about you know, they didn't even plan on that being on that record. You know what I mean?
Well, and another thing too is like you have to think, like, if you're self-conscious or you're overthinking what you're doing on stage and this, that, and the other, if you just think, well, what do you think when you're in the audience? If I'm watching them, I'm into it. Like, I'm not like, he messed up that. No, because even if someone like plays a wrong note, you could be thinking, oh, I wonder if he did that on purpose. Yeah. Because you have them on such a high pedestal that you're like, that was innovative or whatever. Yeah. And it's like,
if they're doing something that you really respect, even if it's not an artist that you know a lot about, if it's somebody who's like, oh, that guy's really cool, he's got a cool guitar. Yeah. I love the sound.
Yeah.
They're confident. I mean, you're probably a better performer than most of the people in the room.
Right.
If you're the one that's on stage right then.
Right.
So, and I think that's the thing too. And I think one thing that's important that we keep alluding to, that a lot of the bands we got into when we were first starting out, it sounds like similarly, it was that they were illuminating that immediately, that, oh, normal people who are still learning their instruments can do that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
You can have, you can have a song and then teach your ex-wife to play drums, and then and then
sister
or whatever you want it to be, none of my business, and that you can make a record that's so immortal and sort of captivating, and also, but the pieces themselves are not that fancy.
Right. Well, and
it's like cooking. I mean, it's like if I just threw a raw chicken at you, you'd be like, oh, salmonella poisoning. But if I threw you a bucket of fried chicken,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
I'm about it.
Yeah, and fried chicken is a great example because you wouldn't eat any of the components by themselves.
Right. Well, and one of the whole big things with the White Stripes for the past 20, 25 years is like a lot of people like to like dog on Meg and stuff. It's like, yeah, but
she sold more records than you, bro.
But she did it.
Yeah.
Like you know, as far as I know, she hasn't been doing anything the past.
And she's not acting like she's Neil Peart or something.
But she wanted to. Like she did her run, and she's like, I'm just gonna sit. Like, I did what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
She's collecting royalties. She's doing fine.
Yeah.
And everyone's
fine.
like, oh,
every time
they
play that song at a soccer game or something,
then you do it. Then you do it. Like,
go do it better.
And that's a great example when people are like, oh, she just did this. Anyone can do it. It's like, then that should inspire you.
That should inspire you, because that you can absolutely do it.
Yeah.
If you can actually do a groove where you can do like some of this, you know what I mean?
Just do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I like a lot of. I just like those moments where like people are humanized,
making it accessible.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's it.
And it makes it even more interesting.
Well, and then you have artists like, you know, like you have the Neil Pearts, or even like.
Well, that's the thing. But the other guy
Buddy
for me
Rich
is Prince. Like, I'm a huge Prince fan.
Oh, dude.
But
Prince is just
we have this Prince live set list, a live playlist on Spotify we play here in the store sometimes, that like you can tell that when he's feeling it, he's going for a solo. He's not every bend is great.
Yeah.
Not every little guitar thing is perfect, because it's all about the emotion, and most of it's really great. Yeah. But like, and Jimmy Page would do this too. You listen to Led Zeppelin live, he's the king of the overbend.
Yeah.
Like when he's bending up, he'll way overdo it, probably because all the cocaine. But like that part of the thing is that, oh, you know what, it's imperfect, but like, and jazz is popular for this.
Yeah.
But taking that to applying that to the electric guitar thing, but like the imperfections and the things that are goofy and quirky, that's why it's cool, and that's why you're not just listening to like
that
like
stuff.
Dragon Force is the total opposite, because it's like super precise, like
well, and same with like I was saying with like Royal Blood and stuff. They're great musicians,
but it's so clean.
It's so clean.
That's just a different thing.
I always likened, like, when you go in a studio, it's like when you like look at your like skin or something under a fluorescent light. Like, it's too fine tuned. I don't want to see that much detail.
It's like when you hear your voice recorded versus how you hear it in your head, or it's like how you look in photos, like, versus how you feel like you look in the mirror.
Right. Or and that's why I've always liked too, like, and I'm sure a lot of people might feel this way, but like when I hear our album, like, I listen to it from time to time.
You're hearing things not everyone's hearing.
Yeah, and I like it, but at the same time, it's just like our live show is so much more energy than this, which is for everyone. That's just that's the nature of it. Yeah. But I'm like, I I can't convey on a recorded album. Like, I really want to do a live album.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's
We
gonna.
did one at the Heavy Anchor.
I would love to do one because I feel like we just have so much more to offer live, because you know, you get into it, you're moving around on stage, you're sweating, you're screaming, you're whatever, and it's such a whole different animal that it's like listening to just on an album is not gonna. It's not the same thing. Yeah. It's just not gonna be.
Give me just 1 second.
Me? Oh, my beat. Yeah. Heard.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to be right on it, but
I was a little bit further back from it.
yeah, I was just checking.
Sweet. Check. All right.
John Mayer down here.
What's up? Oh, he's okay. I'm
Yeah.
gonna press it.
Yeah.
No, you've been fine. I just had to pee and I didn't want to cut it short.
That's all good. I'm chilling.
Because it's not live. We can clip that part out. That's a great point you were making about. We're still rolling? That's a great point you were making about wanting to do a live record. Me and Joe were just talking about this today, that like I recorded my birthday show in 2019 at the Heavy Anchor just because I record all my sets. But
Is that the same place we're playing on July 24th?
Actually, the Heavy Anchor, the same Heavy Anchor on Gravois that you can see Youth and Canvas next week, July 24th at the Heavy Anchor with Blinded by Stereo. And then like that at that show, my computer got stolen, and I had a job transition and stuff, so I wasn't going to get new material out in time. So I had this recording of the show. I was like, what if I mastered it and like put it out as a live record? And it's actually some of my most popular stuff now, streaming. And
so how did you do that? Because we've had done a couple live recordings in Austin just to dip our toes into it, and like some sound guys like let us plug right into the soundboard and we could get a mix kind of roughly from that. Or I have one of those like H6 handy recorders that are like really good
that's
quality,
most
but,
of the
like,
audio I ended up using.
Yeah, I didn't know, like, because I've been kind of playing with the idea. I just didn't know like if you've had experience in it or how y'all went about it. Or,
Yeah. So I have a couple of those
that,
Zoom Q2N cameras with the basically the same recording audio device. It's got a gain trim on it, so it's you can do the high volume audio, and that was most of the audio I used in that. I think I had a side chain of the kick drum or something for some bass, but like. No, we didn't multi-track the whole thing. That would have been more work.
Yeah,
but,
it would have been crazy.
But it definitely sounds that way. But it's still, I mean, it's just because it just worked out to where we could put it out as and because it's streaming, I wouldn't press it on vinyl.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not.
But again, it's just to me, like if we took one of our albums front to back and just played that live and record, like if bands did that, I wouldn't even care, because it's a whole different like
experience.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, and I mean, again, even Jack White has said stuff like this, where he's like, if you want to hear the album, listen to the album. Like, that's not why I'm here to do this in the shows. And there's little different nuances. You might mess up, you might improvise.
And there's stuff on our live album that hasn't been put out in other ways yet, because things, when you're gigging live regularly, like we were doing before the pandemic, you would start folding the new stuff in before it's published.
Right, exactly.
And then
we've got
with
some new ones
COVID
too.
and everything, so we have a couple songs that I was trying to hope to have out by now, but we're doing a Patreon launch July 23rd also at the Heavy Anchor, that we're kind of more focusing on that, but it's like so there's things that you get into. I saw Queens of the Stone Age one time, and they were touring on the reissue of their first album.
To see them live.
And really good. We got engaged at a Queens of the Stone Age show.
That's awesome.
At the Peabody Opera House at the time, and they played their whole first record front to back, and then they took their break, and then they came back and did the hits for the encore, like the other hits.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, that's perfect, because you get this whole, like, because a record is kind of a concept, and it's a whole piece. It's got ups and downs.
Right.
You know, and the White Stripes just released for White Blood Cells, the 20th anniversary of their third record, like a live performance where they played the whole thing front to back. And some of those songs from that record they had never really played live.
Not to go off on a thing, but like Jack White is something else, because White Stripes was decades ago, and he's still releasing like unreleased.
He
like
recorded everything.
How did you think to record this set in 1999?
He was just hoarding things.
I know, it's crazy, and they're like never before heard in 2001 in Japan. I'm like, what? Like,
why do you have that?
And he's like this triple vinyl with never before seen photos of us on tour. I'm like, how do you?
Where do you keep it all?
Yeah,
or just because it was so long ago, and there's so much of it.
Had that foresight and knew he was going to put the work in.
Well, because that was interesting too, because there were things
like
like Dead Leaves was on that record, and that's one of his best songs. And he always plays it even on his solo tours and stuff. And but that song has been around since the beginning of that band, but it didn't come out until like their third record, because something about he was just planning on, no, let's hold on, let's like, because you could tell there's demos of it included that the lyrics weren't done,
right,
and things like that. But that's the thing. It's like we're kind of in this thing with our Patreon that we're launching July 23rd at the Heavy Anchor. That there's stuff that I'm like, I'm not gonna, we have old demos that I want people to have access to, but I'm not going to do a record store day release with a double vinyl that's going to be $50, because that's just not where my fan base is necessarily, to where I'd end up with anything other than a garage full of those. So, trying to give it to them on a digital platform where, but it's like, there's the polished, there's the singles, there's the songs that you really promote that sound really great, and then there's everything else that goes along with it that's still valuable and enjoyable. It's just if you allow it that space to exist in a slightly different way. But I've been terrible with that, because I'm probably more like you. It's like, okay, so this song will go on the next record, this song will go on that record, we got a new one that'll go on this record, as opposed to some people do dozens of pieces and then pick the best from it. I don't tend to have that patience.
No, not at all. Well, and this was another really interesting thing too that maybe not a lot of people might not think about, but like, say there's a well-known band and they're putting out records and they put out a new album, and then they get the reviews and people are like, well, it's a little bit more poppy, it's a little bit more this. Then they did an interview. I forget who it was. I forget who it was. I don't want to misquote him, but it was a band, and the guy was saying
they play music.
Yeah, right. He was saying, it's interesting. He goes, I wrote half of these songs 10 years ago.
Right.
And it's interesting because when you release it on a new album, people think these were all written after the last album, and this is the direction they're going in. And he's like, that's not the case at all. He's like, we Frankensteined a bunch of these ideas, and that made our new album. And even myself, I'd never thought about that before, because it's just chronologically, you think that's how it goes. Oh, they wrote an album, now they wrote these ones and put it on an album. But he's like, 6 of these 15 songs, he's like, I've had in my back pocket since 2010. And it's interesting because you hear them as a whole with the new ones, and it's just because it's a new album doesn't mean it's all new songs. And I just don't think people think that happens a lot, is because, there's these singers who have, there was some statistic where it's like Rivers Cuomo had like 800 unreleased songs. And he just started throwing them away or releasing them, and it's like, dude, these are 15 years old. And everyone's like, his new sound sucks, and it's like, it's not as new. It's not as new.
Actually, was on the cutting room floor 20 years ago.
And that's just really interesting.
That's sort of and the opposite end of that is like the Prince thing, with his estate releasing so much unreleased stuff. Some of that I get nervous about, because as such a Prince fan and really trying to understand like his intentions as an artist, it makes me kind of nervous that there's stuff that he didn't put out and that he didn't necessarily plan to release at this time, but you're releasing it at this time now that he's gone, and so it's like,
he can't say anything about it.
Did he think that was good enough?
Why did he release it?
And then and they're having people that really worked with him closely, like I think Morris Hayes is his music director, who's a keyboard guy, who is working on a lot of this stuff, so he knows what it's supposed to sound like. It's just like, he would have given it to us if he thought it was ready.
Well,
maybe.
Hopefully, I would assume that whoever gets past that responsibility is someone that Prince would trust and respect their vision, and
that's the part that makes
understand him.
That's what makes me really nervous. You know what I mean? Is because I hope that that's the case. That's so funny. So let's wrap this up because I gotta let you do your thing, and I want to get this up for the people. But Youth and Canvas, YOUTH ampersand CANVAS.
It's a funny bit. A little fun fact. So the name is actually from a poem that Jack White wrote that's on the inside of the Elephant book. So
I didn't even know we were going to talk about all this.
we're not going to talk about it.
I know, no, but it's just funny. I didn't know that. I was going to ask where the name came from, but you know how people are. You get asked that all the time.
I always had this fantasy that I would just make up a new reason every time someone asked me.
Well, that's like with this. I have this this waveform tattooed on my arm.
Oh, that's blank check.
And I always tell people it's baby got back. And my aunt has something in Chinese on her lower back. She always tells people it says sweet and sour pork. So,
yeah, why not?
Youth and Canvas, July 24th at the Heavy Anchor. That whole weekend at the Heavy Anchor is going to be crazy. We're celebrating the Jacob V Weekly Patreon launch on July 23rd. That's the Friday night with my trio. We'll be playing with the Saturday Brothers. The next night, my new band, Blinded by Stereo, July 24th at the Heavy Anchor with Youth and Canvas, the homecoming extravaganza. Cash, thank you so much for coming to see
I appreciate you having me.
I'm so excited to see you, and I
ready.
can't wait to see all of our amps on stage in
I know,
one
right?
place.
It's going to be a good time. I've been itching to get back on stage, so we're putting a lot of energy into it, and it's going to be really good. It's
And
gonna
then
be loud and fast, and it's going to be exciting. So
yeah, once we're not cramming for a gig, you guys will have to come do a musical guest spot for the podcast. We were doing those
absolutely, man.
for a little bit. It's been slow with COVID and then all the editing and whatnot. But I'm doing, I think Jacob V and the Yes Men are streaming our practice on Sunday from the Beat Lab. And so I think I'm going to leave all that stuff set up, and we're going to have musical guests come back through. So yeah, that would be super easy with the two of you guys. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then, yeah, we do those for YouTube and stuff, and then I multi-track the audio separately, so we try to make it look and sound as good as possible. So, yeah, Cash, thanks so much again. So happy to see you, and again, find us next week at the Heavy Anchor and online Jacob V Weekly Youth and Canvas. Out.